Here's a reverend who doesn't like the fact that his church is becoming less discriminatory against gay folks.
Why do I feel anxiety about this? Well, we are up against the authorities. 3 bishops from the established church. That means either I am wrong, and Christians have been teaching incorrectly for the last 2,000 years, and Jews and Christians for the last 4,000 to 6,000 years, or we have church leaders attempting to drag the church into apostasy. Neither way is good.
I don't know, the second way sounds pretty good to me.
The consequences are severe. This debate is not just happening in this chamber. This debate is happening in real time in the House of Bishops as we speak. There's a growing number of vocal bishops who want to change the church's teaching on marriage. The result being the spiritual neglect of Anglicans up and down this country. Now, I may have trained at the last remaining sound Anglican seminary up the road at St. Stephen's House, but I am a newbie deacon. So perhaps I am wrong on this. Let's consult people wiser than myself, starting with the church fathers. St. Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, quite clearly identifies matrimony as being between one man and one woman, beneficial for begetting of children, and for the good of offspring for both educational and developmental purposes, necessary for the perfection of the community and for the worship of God. St. Paul describes marriage as, therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh, in which he is mirroring the language of Genesis, where God tells man and woman to be fruitful and multiply.
Which is actually a less nuanced position that Jesus himself had. Jesus certainly did not endorse gay marriage, but he did recognize that things cannot always be as simple as man plus woman equals baby. Not everyone can participate in this, and not everyone wants to. Jesus makes allowances for this. In Matthew, Jesus is quoted as saying, "There are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can." It's never explicitly stated that Jesus himself was ever married. If not even Jesus was married, how important can marriage really be to Christianity?
Both Aquinas and Paul refer to matrimony as a sacrament, a holy mystery in which one man and one woman are joined together in conjugal union with the potential to be blessed by the grace of God with children.
Even if you think raising children is an advantage for marriage, it certainly isn't necessary for marriage. The church has never had a prohibition against people who are infertile from marrying. If a postmenopausal octogenarian wants to get married, there has never been a church rule prohibiting it. So fecundity can't be that important a requirement for marriage.
To start a family for the worship of God. People will often argue in this debate, we know more about homosexuality now than we did then. Maybe so. But are we really going to suggest that God knew less then than we know now?
When it comes to the Bible's countenance of slavery, an excuse I often hear apologists make is that God always opposed slavery, but allowed it temporarily to accommodate the hardness of people's hearts. Jesus said that Moses allowed divorce for the same reason. I'm not a Christian, but if I were, I would be asking why it could not be the case that God was simply opposing gay marriage temporarily to accommodate the hardness of people's hearts that made them bigoted against gay people.
For either all of Scripture is God-breathed, or it isn't. Either we believe Christ, or we don't.
Yeah, but according to Christ, the teachings of the Bible are sometimes just meant to accommodate the hardness of people's hearts rather than express what God actually wants.
So let's refer to another source, the Book of Common Prayer, one of the Anglican formularies, an authority of liturgy and catechism in the Anglican Church. The prayer book lists 3 ordained reasons for matrimony. First, it was ordained for the procreation of children, to be brought up in the fear and nature of the Lord, and to praise his holy name.
But since people known to be infertile are not prohibited to marry, the ability to produce children is not and has never been a requirement for marriage.
Second, it was ordained for a remedy against sin and to avoid fornication, that such persons as have not the gift of constancy might marry and keep themselves undefiled members of the church's body.
I'm sure you would agree that straight folks are not the only ones who occasionally have not the gift of constancy. Even if you consider relations between a married gay couple to be fornication, if you want to reduce the number of people with whom they fornicate, excluding gay folks from marriage seems counterproductive. I personally don't care how many partners people have. But if you want to reduce the number of partners any person has, why would you not want to encourage gay couples to participate in an institution that, in a religious context, incentivizes them to stick only to their spouse, or in some cases, even in the Bible, spouses?
And thirdly, it was ordained for the mutual society, help and comfort, that one ought to have the other, both in prosperity and adversity.
People committing themselves to each other is good for people and for society, regardless of the genders of the people entering into such commitments. Why would you seek to denigrate such a commitment made by a gay couple by forbidding to recognize it as a legitimate marriage?
And if we look wider abroad to the Church Catholic, which defines in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, matrimony, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole life, is by the nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized persons has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament.
So does this mean that unbaptized people shouldn't be allowed to get married either?
This is referred to as marriage in God's plan. So are we looking to alter the catechism of just the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church too? Should they all get with the times? 2,000 years of Christian doctrine cannot be altered at the whim of a few liberal bishops.
Even though this guy's not Catholic, I can still tell what his views are on the Second Vatican Council. A lot of Catholics didn't like that nearly 2,000 years of holding all Jews to be guilty of the unaliving of Jesus was altered by a few liberal church officials.
What is God ordained cannot be adjusted to suit our new liberal progressive views.
I don't think the Anglicans who want to be more tolerant of gay folks view themselves as adjusting what God ordained. Rather, I suspect that they are reinterpreting what God ordained, just as they did when they stopped endorsing slavery.
Marriage is heterosexual and monogamous and should be open to the possibility of children.
There are plenty of examples from the Bible of marriage not being monogamous, and there's never been a rule barring anyone postmenopausal from marrying, so the possibility of children has never been a requirement either.
The Bible backs all of this up. It's very clear throughout on this matter, whether it's 9 verses or 32,000 verses. Marriage is between one man and one woman for the purposes of procreation.
Then why does the Bible recognize so many polygynous marriages, and why have the infertile never been prohibited from marrying?
Sex outside of marriage is a sin, and that is the same for heterosexuals as it is for homosexuals.
Well, you could reduce the amount of fornication that occurred outside of marriage if you let gay couples marry.
Although the Bible is quite clear that same-sex relations are abhorrent. And before some smart aleck starts asking me the question of whether I'm wearing mixed fabrics, there is a difference between the moral laws and ceremonial laws.
Apparently the difference is that the moral laws are defined as the ones you want to keep, and the ceremonial laws are defined as the ones you want to ignore.
And Christ did come to fulfill the old laws. Both the issues of marriage and homosexuality, however, are still addressed in the New Testament, in Paul's epistles, but also in the Gospels. Jesus does talk of marriage in Mark and Matthew, both in the context of heterosexual union. So my question to the bishops would be, do we not believe in the authority of scriptures anymore? Can we pick and choose which parts of the gospel we adhere to?
When it comes to ceremonial laws, apparently you can. And are you picking and choosing when you oppose slavery, given that the New Testament says that slaves should obey their masters? If you are, then why can't you pick and choose with respect to any other prohibition?
The church, after all, is Christ's bride, as we heard earlier.
It doesn't seem very monogamous if Jesus is allowed to marry a whole institution of people.
Jesus is described as the bridegroom, so that we may know how he relates to us. 2 grooms would be pointless. Christ is already in union with the Father and the Holy Spirit.
So the church is a woman then? Tell that to Matt Walsh. His mind will be blown. I mean, how else are we to interpret the idea that being married to a church is a heterosexual marriage?
It's us he's inviting in.
It's us he's inviting in? So all Christians constitute one big bride? That's a more innovative conception of womanhood than I've heard from any progressive.
2 brides is what we're looking at here. The church is attempting to marry itself.
How do you get 2 brides out of someone marrying oneself? Wouldn't that just be one bride?
And to leave Christ out of the picture. We are directly talking about undermining God's plan as he has revealed it to us. We're replacing his authority with our own. If marriage is no longer between one man and one woman,
again, why are you ignoring all of the polygynous marriages depicted in the Bible?
are we open to the idea of polygamy?
Well, the Old Testament certainly is. If God is not open to polygamy, Why was it okay for Abraham, Israel, Judah, Gideon, Samson, David, and Solomon? Those are Old Testament examples, but this dude is portraying the potential acceptance of polygamy as some perverse innovation, when in actuality, if Christians did embrace it, it would be a return to tradition.
We disregard the heterosexual aspect, so why not the monogamous aspect too? If love is love, as we keep hearing, who's to say that 3 men loving each other is not more love than 2 men loving each other? Shame, degeneracy. And I'm sure someone in this chamber has echoed the words love is love tonight, and this is not about love being love. This is about marriage, the sacrament of holy matrimony. It is directly connected to love, but it's not the definition of love. Too many people utter those words and confuse the meaning of love. Agape, the biblical context of love, is a divine love. It's a sacrificial love. It's not lustful.
What makes you think love between gay folks is any more lustful than love between straight people?
People often conflate sex with love. It's very disingenuous. We've heard quite a bit of that. But then, of course, atheists often parrot the words, God is love, and we've heard that one tonight too, again, without any understanding. Yes, God is love.
I've never heard a single atheist say that God is love, let alone heard atheists say it often.
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.